You're listening to Live Wild with me, Hilary Rose. This podcast is an invitation to investigate your life from the ground up. That's why I spoke with my next guest, Fergal Smith from Moy Hill Farm. Fergal is a former big wave pro surfer turned regenerative farmer. He and his family run the beautiful Moy Hill Farm in County Clare. We chat about his time on the surf circuit, the difference between organic farming and regenerative farming, soil depletion and how it affects our health, living your values, and the simple life.
But there's a nice saying, it's not the cow, it's the how. And it's because it certainly isn't the cow's fault or the sheep's fault or whatever. It's how we manage them. So currently it's this massive, huge input system into animals. But essentially, we were talking about herbivores like ruminant animals. They eat grass, and grass grows from sunlight and rain. Mm-hmm. And cows or sheep or goats or deer, or lots of different things, will eat it, and their action of being a herd and walking across the land and trampling and dunging and urinating builds soil. Wow. That is how the planet was created. That is how soil was built. It wasn't from growing vegetables in straight lines. It was from massive herds of animals being chased by predators.
Fergal is a true inspiration. He practices what he preaches and lives his values every day, and I greatly admire that. This chat was so illuminating for me. His knowledge of land, food and the regenerative farming system really blows my mind. I hope you all enjoy this interview as much as I did, and I hope you feel inspired by it. If you'd like more info on Fergal and all that he does, go to moyhillfarm.com. And now, here's the show. Fergal Smith, thank you so much for coming and talking to me today. I know how busy you are on the land, and I really appreciate you taking the time out to chat, because you practice what you preach and you are on the land constantly, so I appreciate it.
I know, thank you, Hilary. Thanks for having me.
Not at all, my pleasure. So when I was looking into your background, obviously you're former pro wave surfer, or still a pro wave surfer, because you never lose those skills, but you're also a regenerative farmer. So those two things don't normally go hand in hand. Obviously, as a pro surfer, you would have traveled the world, which meant away all the time. And now as a regenerative farmer, you're on the land all the time, which means you're kind of in one position. How did you marry the two? And I guess, can you talk us through your background as a pro surfer, and what was the catalyst that switched you into becoming a farmer?
Yeah, it is definitely two different lifestyles, that's for sure. But I suppose the thing you got to remember for me is I grew up on an organic vegetable farm, so it's not actually that new to me, the lifestyle. So the big kind of strange thing is that I became a professional surfer. That's the strange thing. Coming from a small little farm in outside Westport in County Mayo, and having a dream of being a professional surfer, that was a bit wild. And so yeah, I grew up on a farm. I always loved helping my dad on the farm and my neighbours, so it was always something I loved doing. But yeah, I got the surfing bug from, we started going to Achill from when I was young, and always loved it. And then yeah, kind of just dreamed I could go and chase waves around the world and have a lifestyle of being a pro surfer and all this. And I suppose I wouldn't call myself the best surfer in the world or skill wise, but I'm certainly very determined. So when I put my head down to do something, I generally will keep trying until I get there. So yeah, I just kept going, and then somehow I left school and started traveling and managed to get sponsors and chase the world, having a ball. Yeah, it was great, and I loved every bit of it, and it really was a dream come true to imagine yourself surfing the best waves in the world and then actually doing it. And I had this real vision and goal to go to the best waves in the world, see the best surfers in the world, and then try and bring that knowledge back to Ireland and try and then surf Ireland's best waves, which are the best waves in the world as well. But at the time, there was very few people pushing, the boundaries of our waves here in Ireland. So I was kind of going away to learn from the best, and then trying to take some of that kind of knowledge and then try it on our waves. And yeah, I did that for quite some time. And then you kind of do it, and then you kind of go around the next season and you do it again. And then you start to creep in like, well, what's enough? How
Yeah.
many more times do I need to go to Tahiti and Australia, and how many waves do I need to catch until I've actually fulfilled the dreams I was dreaming of? So that kind of got a little uncomfortable towards the end, on just getting another flight and catch another wave. And yeah, like, surfing's an amazing thing to do, and you're really immersed in nature, and it's physically, very demanding, and you're really, you're very fit and able, and it's all great stuff, but it's just about you. Like, it's not really for anyone else. It's your pursuit of kind of a goal and kind of happiness or whatever, but you're not really giving anything back when you go surfing. It's a very self-obsessed sport in many ways.
Wow, interesting. So what then was the catalyst for you to switch into farming again?
So yeah, I was kind of doing this route that I'd stay in Ireland for the winter, and then come the end of the winter, I'd go away for the summer, and then go to the southern hemisphere, which was winter again. So I'd endlessly chasing waves, endlessly on a kind of winter cycle. I didn't see an Irish summer for about, I don't know, 6 years or 7 years or something. And not that it was much to miss, but it was still just strange to never have a full season in your life. So anyway, I went off again on another southern hemisphere trip, and I was in Tahiti, and it was the time when the nuclear plant was sinking into the sea in Japan.
Yes, I remember.
Yeah, and I was surfing in Tahiti, and I had a really bad, like, hit off the bottom, basically, and I hurt my knee pretty bad. So I didn't know how bad it would be, if I was going to have to go home or would it get better. So I was staying with a friend, sitting on his couch for like 2 weeks with a big swollen knee.
Oh, feeling sorry for yourself.
Feeling a bit sorry for myself, but not really. Like, I was sitting in Tahiti.
Yeah.
I was just wondering, like, it was the start of my trip, and I'd be away for 3 months, and wondering if it was kind of have to go home, or would it get better and I could keep going. But anyway, I was sitting there watching, the news and stupid things on TV while I was just kind of resting, and watching this disaster unfold in Japan. And I was just like, oh my God, that's not good stuff. Like, that's really going to affect the world negatively for a long time. And I was in the same ocean, I'm in Tahiti, and Japan is, across the water, and just things started to kind of trigger in my head that I didn't like it. And then I'm like, I'm not really helping anything. I'm not doing anything to help, these kind of problems or anything. So I suppose I just had this moment of, I couldn't keep doing what I was doing. It wasn't good enough just for me just to keep enjoying myself while such disasters were going on in the world. So then I asked myself the big hard question is, what is the best thing I can do? Like, where can I spend my time that's going to have the best impact and the most return for my short life on this little rock that we float around on? And I tried it all. I sat down for, I had days on this couch. So I was like, will I go off to volunteer in some aid organization, or will I go and whatever. I was trying out all these different things, and actually I was kind of messing around, and realistically I knew exactly what I needed to do. I was like, I know I didn't go to college. I've only ever surfed and grew up on a farm, and I actually said, I know exactly what I need to do. I need to go home, start growing some food, and care for some piece of land, and learn how to do that well, and then hopefully try and pass that on to people in my community, that, because unfortunately, as a Western culture, we've kind of made farming some, I don't know, like, poor occupation that's meant to be for, laborers and people who didn't go to school. But it's very, very important that we have farming correct and done well, because it manages our water, our air, our food. It's like the most essential job on the planet. but unfortunately, the Western culture of going through, education and getting this infamous job that's going to be high paying, and everyone goes for this goal, we have very few people trained in managing landscapes and growing good food and, all these really important jobs. So I'm like, well, I actually have a unique position where I have a little bit of experience. I'm young enough to, get into it for the next however many years and hopefully help this Western culture of Ireland to reconnect with, how we're going to manage it in the future, because it isn't promoted through school, it isn't promoted through the media, it's not promoted, it's not cool, it's not something that we should be pursuing. But it's the most, to me, the most crucial occupation that we should be encouraging people to get into. So I actually have some sort of duty to go back and learn the trade myself, and then try and get the next generation to get on board and get and see the importance of it, and see how it's actually the most complex, exciting job you could ever even think to go for. Like, it's such a diverse, and you need to have all sorts of skills, and it's the way it's been kind of told through our academia, I suppose. But that's kind of where it all kind of happened, and I had this vision straight away. I was 24, I think, at the time, and it hasn't changed. I'm 34 now, and it's the exact same. It's still the same mission, still the same thing I'm doing every day. It changes in different, aspects and
different seasons, I guess, as well.
Yeah, and what it looks like maybe doesn't look the same, but it's still the same motive, exactly the same as it was then.
It's amazing, because I suppose, like, your success as a surfer at the time, was there an outcry in the surf community, or indeed your sponsors just going like, what is he doing? Why is he walking away from this?
There really was. It didn't go down. It didn't go down very well. I remember. So I had the light bulb moment, and I sat down. I wrote it all down on my diary, and I was like, "This is it. This is the plan." And so then I straight away, like, very passionately emailed all my sponsors and my family and friends and everyone, and I told them my plans.
Wow.
And I emailed all my sponsors saying, like, "This is it," and I basically called them out. I was like, as surf companies, you're selling this connection to nature and how we're, so cool, and, somehow it's got some image that's something to do with the environment, that it's kind of good, but it's just a company selling stuff. But I'm like, look, as a company, you could be a leader in this, future world we're trying to create, of companies that promote less travel and, good products that last longer, that cost more, but we're going to pay for it, because it's all thinking of a bigger picture. And obviously the machine says no.
Yeah.
But the individual who I emailed in each company, like, they're a human being, and every one of them completely agreed with me, and every one were just like, "You're totally right. This is what we need to do." But they can't go back to the shareholders and tell them we're going to change our profit, margins by such a huge whatever. So it was really fun. It was kind of, they weren't interested in supporting me. I lost all my sponsors pretty much overnight, but they got it. Like, the individual got it. And, like, one company sent me a pack of seeds. One told me a story.
You're like, thanks a million.
Yeah, and it was nice to see that they got it. And one sponsor, actually, he quit his job, the guy I dealt with, the manager, and he started a community garden in France.
Oh,
so there was a cool little thing happened, and I knew I was on the right path. I didn't mind whatever. One sponsor actually kept with me for quite some time, Nixon Watches, and they have a team trip every year where all the team meet up, and we go to Iceland and we go to different places. And so I couldn't go on the team trip because I don't travel anymore and I'm running a farm. So they brought the team trip to the farm the next year.
That's awesome.
And that was pretty cool. Like, they brought a bunch of pro surfers to the farm, and they all worked for a day. Brilliant. And hung out. So that was really cool. But eventually they're a bit like, like, we can't really keep sponsoring you when you're not actually doing what the job requires. So
But fair play, that's such an inspirational thing, especially as a 24-year-old. Like, I've come to kind of my own, I suppose, inner truth or path or journey much, much later in life. So, like, fair play that you did it as 24 and that you really stuck to your guns. Like, I suppose, how do you measure success now as opposed to what you did prior to making that decision?
Yeah, it's funny. I've been chatting about this recently to someone because it's the same in farming as well. Like, there's no, there's new up and coming farms that would be kind of trendy and leading the way in regenerative agriculture. But some of them would be really putting the finances and the profit margin as the goal. Like that, that's the success story. If the farm is profitable and you can have the modern industrial wage as well as farming, then the farm's a success. And I was only chatting about this to some farming friends of mine that I really don't think it's a good way to get into farming. Like it's you're setting yourself up for a bit of failure really, because farming is all consuming, it's never ending, it's never going to pay you for your hours. And I just think we need to tap into a more of a the health is your wealth kind of motto,
Yeah.
that if you're healthy and you're well and you're mentally happy and you're enjoying what you do and you have a lovely environment to live in, like that's what the money is for. Like the money is to buy time off, to go and do nice things, to buy nice food. Like that what money is actually essentially for. Money doesn't give you happiness by
Yep.
default.
Yep.
It's to get those things that you actually can have through farming by default. You
Beautiful.
are very physical and very active and fit, and you're eating a good diet, you're connected to nature, and you're in a nice environment. So straight away, like, that's wealth above a lot more than money that can create. So obviously it's a challenge though, because you really do get a bit sick of working hard and not having much money.
Yeah.
And we have to live in a modern world where you have to pay for your car and insurance and these annoying bills. So that really, there is a friction there with the lifestyle.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
that is a challenge. But it's the wealth certainly for me isn't about the economic side of things. It's more about the life you get to live and how happy you are in doing it. They're the real goals for me. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. I feel the same, to be honest. Like, it's again, how do you measure success? You've said it. Money can buy you lots of nice things, but at the same time, it doesn't buy you your health. It doesn't buy you the quality of
No.
life. For me personally, I need to feel very deeply connected within myself, and I do that through nature and through living well, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's a big one that I try to portray to people not sure about farming. It's like you're not going to understand the value of farming, like, on the outset looking at it. It's something you will get to understand many years down the road. Like, it's something that you'll start to feel as you've planted, say, you've planted 1,000 trees. In 10 years time, as those trees are growing up around you, and now there's birds there, and then there's life happening because of what you've done, there's a deeper happiness that you can never quantify in that. That's so powerful. That's more than any fancy car could ever give you. And that is where the magic lies in farming, that you can't see the value in it. It's something that happens around you, and you couldn't explain to someone why it's so good. And it's those little subtleties, and seeing your animals really healthy, and if you've got kids, watching your kids run around in lovely meadows, like, they're all things that are just so priceless
Yeah.
that you would never want to lose them. But there's no value on them, there's no monetary, you can't pay for that.
Absolutely.
So that stuff is it's very hard to quantify to someone why a lifestyle in farming is so nutritious in so many ways.
For the soul, not just the body.
Totally. Like, to
Yeah.
wake up, like, I'm up at 5:30 every morning, and I see every sunrise, and like those little moments are just no one would choose to get up at 5 a.m., but it's magic.
Yeah.
Even when it's blowing a gale and lashing rain, there'll be a ray of sun that comes through the clouds, and your day's made. Like, it's kind of like that stuff is pretty spectacular, really.
Absolutely. My dad always said that. He said the very best part of the day was sunrise, just sunrise when the world
Yeah,
was just waking up. But it's like you get that moment to yourself before everybody else kind of starts to get busy. And there's something about the quality of the air at that moment as well.
totally.
It's totally different to like even 8 a.m. or 9 a.m.
Yeah, and all the
Um,
animals know it. Like, so all the birds, all that, bird song, everything's kind of just really kind of a special time to be in
yeah,
nature, and it's, yeah,
yeah.
you can't pay for that really.
You can't, really can't. And I suppose, like your background, your parents were organic farmers, and like, is that something that you feel you want to pass on to your kids as well? Like, it was
Totally.
intrinsically in you, you know?
Yeah, and I suppose when I sat down that time in Tahiti and I looked at, how I grew up and how I was living this rock star lifestyle of flying around the world, I was like, I didn't realize how privileged of an upbringing I had.
Mm,
Even though we didn't have a cent to our name as a family, like we literally just about, broke even as we did what we did. But like my dad was there every single day of the week, 7 days a week. We all lived there, we all ate really well.
yeah.
And I was like, yeah, most kids actually don't get that in a Western culture. And I really want to create that for my kids because it was a great way to grow up and it was the best memories and whatever. So I realized, at that time, I remember sending my parents a letter just thanking them because I was like, I didn't realize at the time how good it was of a lifestyle until you grow up and you realize most Westerners, they didn't have those childhoods, and that's kind of sad. So yeah, I was really then even more thinking, yeah, this is definitely the way I would like to have my kids grow up.
And I guess as well, when you say you grew up when you didn't have a cent, but like, here you are, you know, and life always finds a way. There's so
That's it.
much value put on money. Money's only energy, you know what I
Yeah,
mean? It can be created anytime, anywhere, brought in, brought out.
yeah,
Not to have like this kind of callous sense of money, but it's not everything, you know?
certainly, yeah. No, like my lifestyle of surfing was crazy. Like the more I traveled, the more I consumed, the more I got paid.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
was like, something's so fundamentally wrong about this. Like,
Mm.
the more I put myself out there, the more I basically just, yeah, consumed whatever for myself, the more my sponsors, because it was all based on coverage. Like, so the
Yeah.
more
Yeah.
coverage you get, the more, rewarded you got. And I just thought the whole thing was wrong. Like, I just thought this is kind of out of control. And, I made loads of money and it was only for a couple of years, but I was like, it's not that hard. Like, you actually can make money if you want. But I've chosen to put every cent I had, it wasn't that much, all into the farm. And I'm much happier seeing it in living things,
Mm.
in
Mm.
stuff that's growing than in a bank, that doesn't do anything. So,
No, and it's actually depleting because it's sitting in bank
yeah,
accounts now, depleting because of interest rates. So,
yeah.
like, you may as well put it into the
And
land, really.
totally, and I don't have any money, but I don't want to do anything else, so it doesn't really matter.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah,
It's perfect. You found the perfect cycle. Let's talk a little bit about when I was again looking at your website. Okay, so I would have always thought of you as an organic farmer, but on the website you say regenerative agriculture. What's the difference? I don't know the difference. What's the difference between regenerative and organic, or is there a difference?
yeah, it's a good question. And it's terminologies and words that people have been using now in this kind of modern world. So when I grew up, my dad was organic, and there was 7 organic growers in the country, I think, at the time, and so
Wow.
he was quite pioneering in his ways. And anyone who was organic back in the 80s would have been, they would have been people who really cared and really were, doing their utmost. But then as organic got popular and makes its way onto the supermarket shelves, and Tesco's are buying organic from Spain and Italy, the term organic lost its credibility, basically.
Mm-hmm.
It's all now in a, red tape, form filling. They've ticked the box that it's organic, but you could be destroying the soil and the environment just as much as the chemical farmer in an organic system now.
Wow. Wow.
So yeah, like it's not all it's cracked up to be. It's better obviously than spraying chemicals, but at the same time there's a lot of fundamentals in farming that we need to practice to look after soil. It's not just about removing chemicals, and organics is essentially just keeping chemicals off the land. But you could have bare soil, plow agriculture, these kind of techniques that are, the most common in all agriculture as well as organics, which, you know, wash away soil, release carbon, which aren't ideal. So we need to, if we're, you know, and people talk about sustainability, and like that doesn't really work. We need to be building soil. We need to be making the world better, not worse, or not even keep it. If we're trying to keep it the same when it's not in a good place, like that's not any good anyway.
Yeah.
So, and they say in nature, like things either go up or they go down. They don't stay the same. So if it's not going up, it's going down. And, you know, certainly the bigger organic kind of operations would be pretty much in a degenerative system, I would say.
Wow.
And they're done on massive scale with, you know, a lot of machinery, which again isn't what we want to be, you know, going into in the future either. We want more farmers, essentially.
Can I read? There's a bit on your website, and I took it off the website because I want to get it right, okay? So it says, why regenerative agriculture? The loss of the world's fertile soil and biodiversity pose a mortal threat to our future survival. According to soil scientists, at current rates of soil destruction, i.e. decarbonisation, erosion, desertification, chemical pollution, within 50 years, we will not only suffer serious damage to public health due to a qualitatively degraded food supply characterised by diminished nutrition and loss of important trace minerals, but we will literally no longer have enough arable topsoil to feed ourselves. Without protecting and regenerating the soil on our 4 billion acres of cultivated farmland, 8 billion acres of pasture land, and 10 billion acres of forest land, it will be impossible to feed the world or halt the loss of biodiversity. I read that and I was like, that's frightening.
It is a bit.
Within, I mean, not to sound dramatic about it, but within 50 years, and again, that goes back to your regenerative policy of building the soil rather than depleting it. So how do you do that? Like, talk us through that, like, kind of briefly. I know it's going to be so complex to really get into it, but how do you do that on your farm, Moy Hill Farm?
Yeah, so it is, as you say, it's very complex. So this is what I came from organic background, and you know, it was vegetables that my parents did, so that's what I started. And I was vegetarian for 8 years and thought that was great, and you know, growing vegetables is great. But firstly, we got to think about it, like, for starters, vegetables they take up a small proportion of the land. You can grow a lot of veg in a small place. Now the inputs, the fertility that goes into those gardens is then taken from huge tracts of land, be it, you know, animal manures or green manures or even trees or whatever it is to make the fertility that goes into those gardens. So people don't.
Are you talking about like bags of compost and stuff like that?
Yeah. So compost and fertility that you use to grow veg. So horticulture is an input-output system. You put in nutrients and you get out vegetables, and that has to, you know, there has ideally been more inputs going in, so it gets healthier every year. But it's a man-made system. There's nothing natural about growing vegetables in, you know, straight lines in a, you know, field off down the road. Like, that doesn't happen naturally in the wild. That's a very man-made creation where we've cultivated wild plants into more palatable plants that we like to eat, and we do that with, you know, lots of efficiency. And it can be done very well, and it can be done in a way that's positive. But it is a very much an input and then an output system. So it can be done well, and we do it, and it's very important. I think people eat vegetables, so we need to have them and do them as well as possible. But by its nature, it's not a regenerative practice. You know, it doesn't build soil just because you're growing vegetables. So thinking people eating vegetables, they're doing a good thing for the environment. Yeah, it's better than buying industrial meat, for example.
Okay. Yeah.
But it's not actually building any soil. It's a lesser impact. It's a less of a negative at the moment. But so the vegetable kind of craze and the green, you know, talking about, you know, being vegetarian or vegan or just eating more of a plant-based diet as a healthier and a better thing for the planet, that's based off looking at an industrial meat system, which is hugely degenerative because it's based on, you know, feeding cows grain and overgrazing land and winter housing animals, like all those things are hugely, massively negative. Like, why are we so we're plowing land to grow grain, spraying it with chemicals, and then we're feeding the grain to the cows that are inside. Yeah, there's just a million things that are so vastly wrong that has made animals look like, the worst thing in the planet. But there's a nice saying: it's not the cow, it's the how. And it's because it certainly isn't the cow's fault or the sheep's fault or whatever. It's how we manage them. So currently it's this massive, huge input system into animals. But essentially, we were talking about herbivores, like ruminant animals. They eat grass, and grass grows from sunlight and rain. And cows or sheep or goats or deer, or lots of different things, will eat it, and their action of being a herd and walking across the land and trampling and dunging and urinating builds soil. Wow. That is how the planet was created. That is how soil was built. It wasn't from growing vegetables in straight lines. It was from massive, massive herds of animals being chased by predators. So a herd is a herd because it stays together to keep safe, and there's a predator always following the herd. And the weak, ones in the herd, or the old, or the whatever, would have got taken, and then the herd kept good genetics, would have bred on and kept going. But it was all, they were moving. The herds they could be in 5, 10,000, 50,000, buffalo or bison or cows or whatever, moving along. But they would be, they wouldn't stop. So they say it would have been like 500 to 1,000 cows per acre. But they could be there
That's
for
insane.
But they could be there for 10 minutes.
Yeah, okay.
So they're moving all the time.
Yeah,
because something was behind them. So there's just this crazy impact. All this trampling, all this dung, urine, and eating all the grass, and then they mightn't come back for 3 months. They do a big long meander for miles and miles and miles and come back again. And that's how all of grass is evolved by that. Grass grows and it has to be cut. If grass doesn't get cut, it goes stale, it goes rank, and then you get brush and scrub coming in. Yeah. And that's basically how soil is built. So what we now need to do is mimic that, because unfortunately there isn't just wild land, and we have roads and we have fences and private property, and so we don't have 10,000 cows roaming around Ireland or whatever.
Which is a lovely notion, but how do we do it now? That's the thing. Yeah.
Now they have done it in Africa where they don't have any fences, and people would have had 2 cows, say. But instead of every farmer managing their 2 or 3 cows, they've put 600 farmers together.
Brilliant.
And now they're managing 1,000 cows, and only 50 of them need to do it, and the rest of them can do something else.
Amazing.
So they've got 600 cows moving around, and the way more impact, they can build way more soil, and it's more natural how it functions. But yeah, we don't really have that luxury here unless you get really friendly with your neighbor and you can join your 2 herds together. It's a dream of mine that I could get my neighbors to join our herds together and we could all manage them when they're on your farm. But that's a kind of a cool idea. Yeah. But anyway, for now, we basically mimic the same thing where you make small little paddocks with electric fence, and you keep them in there as much as you're willing to move them, basically. So once a day is my kind of minimum, and then twice a day, if I have the time, is kind of what I would try and aim for. But yeah, once a day they get a small paddock, and then you keep moving them, and that way they're getting, they're going into lush fresh grass, and they get 10 out of 10 A grade grass. But by the time that day is up, it's not all gone. There's still quite a bit left. But the next morning, they're going back into fresh grass again. So
amazing. The quality of the produce is going to be phenomenal.
Well, this is it. The huge problem with our management of livestock is that once you keep, like, an animal goes into, it could be a 10-acre field and there could only be 5 cows. They'll go and eat the A grade grass the whole way around. So the next day it's B grade, and the next day it's C grade. You leave them in there for 2 or 3 weeks and they're gone way down the alphabet and it's got really nasty. And then you get parasites, and then we're worming our animals, and then they get sick, and then there's vet bills.
Then you're going into the chemical side of things as well. Yeah.
Whereas there is no sick animals when you move them every day. They go onto fresh grass. It's how they've evolved. They're healthier. They're happier. And the mad thing is you end up having more grass and you can end up outwintering them longer.
Wow.
It just gets easier and easier. It's a daily chore, but most farmers check their cows every day anyway. So you just have to set up. There is a challenge of water. It's having water in each paddock is a little bit of a logistic, but it's not that hard to do either. So that's how you build soil essentially. There's loads of other techniques. So what we also do is we have laying hens, and we follow the cows and the sheep with laying hens. Because the problem is when we have a small farm, you have a small herd. A herd isn't a herd of animals until it's over 80 cows. Just so you know.
Okay.
The herd doesn't operate like a herd until it's over 80.
I didn't know that.
That's something I read somewhere, which, it makes sense when there are massive herds.
Yeah.
So they're quite small. Like we only have, I don't know, like we'll have about 15 cows and, about 40 sheep. So it's very small. So you don't get the same impact as you would have when you had a huge herd. So what happens is, again, even in a small paddock, they'll still only eat the best of it, the grass, and they don't eat the rougher stuff. And what you want them to do is to trample the stuff they don't eat. Because the stuff they don't want to eat is kind of coarse and not palatable. And that's very rich, that's very carbon based, kind of getting more woody. But if you leave it standing there, it'll just stand there and it'll oxidize and do nothing. But if you get onto the ground and it touches the ground and it gets wet, it will break down, and then that is you storing carbon essentially.
Amazing. Wow.
So that's what we need to do, but it's hard to get them to trample at all. So if you come in behind them with chickens or turkeys or geese or whatever, they're brilliant for trampling, because they just go over everything and they just walk over everything.
Yeah.
So it's a really good way to do that, and it really boosts the pasture, and and you have a byproduct of eggs or whatever, and it's a great little system. Now the only problem is it's based on inputs. Again, it's based on grain inputs, so it's not an ideal system. But it's a way to build pasture and to build another product and another revenue into the farm.
Wow.
But long term, you'd ideally only have grazing animals, because we need to get away from inputs. Like inputs is just, that's the problem really. It's a problem.
When you talk about sustainability, I suppose that's what you mean by coming away from the inputs.
Yeah, we really have to, we're getting. There is no-till grain farming, which basically, because tilling and ploughing and this kind of actions, which is predominantly how most grain is grown, is a real problem, because it's, you're basically breaking open the earth every spring and you're releasing all this carbon, and you're having bare soil, and then it rains and then soil runs off the land. So every year soil is getting washed away. Now there is no-till, farming, which is becoming more and more popular, which is definitely the future, which can be done better. But still, it's mainly plough agriculture at the moment.
Yeah.
But even still, it's, the grain farming is all done with big tractors, and there's all the transportation. So it's just not ideal. So it's what we're having to work with at the moment. But so it's just interesting to talk about what's the best thing for the environment and what's the best thing for your health. Like, a lot of people tell me that they only eat white meat, chicken or things like this, because they don't like the big think cows are the worst, and it's so funny, and vegetables being the best, and it's like almost the exact opposite. Like cows are literally the best thing for the environment, the best thing for your health. If they're just eating grass that's been grown by sun and rain and nothing else, like, you don't really get better than that. But whereas the inputs that go into the poultry is a very industrial system, and same loads of inputs into the vegetables as well. But like, it all can be done well. Every enterprise can be done, at its optimum. But if you're looking at building soil and having low inputs, it's the animals that do that. It's just how they're managed is the key.
That's the thing. It feels like there's not enough information out there regarding what you're talking about, and as opposed to what's being sold in supermarkets. And, again, how it's all been sold to us is going to be packaged in a certain manner anyway,
Yeah, and there's some scary stuff happening with regenerative. So I use the word regenerative agriculture. There's biological farming, there's agroecology, there's loads of other words that kind of be a bit more details, but regenerative is quite tangible to anyone, that it basically regenerates every year. Every year it has to be building. But the word regenerative is being hijacked by like kind of modern tech farming, where they're all about like super efficiency, but it's all just trying to still sell stuff to people, which is just ridiculous. So it's really hard for consumers to see through the kind of advertising.
Yeah. You
And
have to
that
be
is a
so,
challenge.
yeah, you have to be so discerning. I even feel like, I mean, I've been vegetarian, I've been vegan, I've, done, mixed up my diet in various different ways to find what works for me. But I look at stuff that's been sold now, in particular in the last couple of years, as vegan, and it's absolute awful stuff. And it's just because they slap a vegan title on it that people think that
Totally.
it's healthier for them, or they think that it's beneficial to the planet, and it's absolute rubbish being sold to you, so you have to be so discerning.
It's just it's very hard for advertisers to get on board with proper regenerative agriculture, because regenerative agriculture cuts out all the middle people.
Yeah.
It basically just goes back to the farmer and his land, and there's nobody else.
But this is
And
what
they
I
don't like that one.
yeah, and this is what I think is so beautiful, because this is what I feel like the future is like a decentralization on all scales of everything, and in particular our food chain. When you look at the amount that Ireland imports is just criminal. When we have, I mean, I read once that they used to call Ireland land of the two crops, because we have the perfect climate to get two crops out of it. I don't know now if that fits in with your regenerative farming techniques, but in essence what I'm saying is that like our land is so lush that we can feed ourselves no problem, but yet we import vast amounts of food.
Yeah. No, it's all, unfortunately, to be pointing fingers, it really is the middlemen that have taken. The farmers don't, like all the dairy farmers and beef farmers, like 98% of our dairy is exported. Like,
it's crazy. Yeah.
All these guys, they're not creaming it. It's the big co-ops in the middle that are taking the dairy and exporting it. And it's all for food additives, for processed food. It's not actually food. It's not going out as cheese and butter and milk. It's going out into food additives for crap stuff that we don't even need. So it's
for vegan stuff.
crazy. Powdered milk and all this kind of stuff. So it is, but there's two like really positive things that could change everything, or not. Two ideas is like the power is in the consumer. So like straight away, the consumer can tomorrow say no, and then they're finished and they don't exist. So that obviously doesn't happen overnight, but the consumer has all the say. And the other thing is the regenerative farming like practices that I'm talking about cost no money.
Amazing.
So every farmer, if they decide tomorrow to go into more of a regenerative kind of way of farming, they don't have to invest a cent. They literally just change their management. They change their philosophy and they operate differently, but like they have the fences, they have the tractors, even though they won't even need them anymore half as much. It's like they don't have to go and buy anything new. They don't have to go down to Kerry Co-op and buy anything. So it's at our fingertips, tomorrow every farmer could be operating differently and the world would be radically getting better, like overnight. And that's a nice feeling just to remember. And like a third of the world's land is in grassland. And at the moment it's negative. At the moment, like a lot of practices around the world is burning, like they burn off the grass at the end of the year that they didn't trample properly or whatever. And that releases more carbon. So at the moment it's very negative, going the wrong way, but all of a sudden with a different management it can be storing, like, so they say like something like if we in 1 year, if we literally manage the grassland properly, we would capture all the carbon that's being released at present by every industrial system that's going, just by a different management.
That's incredible.
So we don't need an electric car, we don't need a fancy new solution. It's literally in the thinking and the management, and we don't need any fancy new ideas. It just has to be done well and very simply, and empower the farmers that they know. Like the farmers actually even know all this stuff, but they've been sold this industrial dream of having an easier life on a big tractor and all these different things. But yeah, it's just it's kind of a dead end dream.
Yeah, it's a kind of a negative loop, isn't it? And I love that you raised the point about the power is in the hands of the consumer. I always feel that, because it's literally
Yeah.
supply and demand. And then in the States, they talk about the power of the dollar. We have the
Yeah.
power to do it because, like you say, you either buy it or you don't. You don't buy it, it goes off the market.
Exactly.
You know,
No,
so
I think it's the most powerful vote you'll ever have. Like, never
mm,
mind going for a election or voting anyone in different. Like, politicians, all these, they can't do that much. They really can't.
yeah,
Like, as much
yeah,
as
yeah,
they may care, it's down to the consumer. That is the most powerful vote out there. Like,
absolutely.
everything will shift depending on where the money goes.
And that actually brings me to, like, my buzzword for the last 2 years has been sovereignty. That's like, sovereignty literally means to self-govern, as you know.
Yeah.
But sovereignty within every area of your life. Sovereignty, but in particular, sovereignty of your finances and how you consume and where you spend them. But also food sovereignty. So, like, I got into growing recently, again in the last couple of years, because I had this kind of innate fear, I want to say, of being hungry, and it was a real mindset that I had to switch out of. And I do feel it was kind of a generational thing. It was a fear of being hungry the entire time. And I suppose when I switched out of it, it was when I switched into my own food sovereignty and sovereignty in all different areas of my life. And I did that by growing my own food, foraging for food, which I love as well. Wild foraging is just amazing when you have a bit of know-how. And it really took the pressure off me feeling, oh my God, I have to get my food from a supermarket. And what if the shelves run dry, or all that kind of stuff. For anybody else who's out there who's like listening and living in cities or urban areas, how would you encourage them to kind of nurture their own food sovereignty in a sense?
Yeah, everyone's context is very different, so it really depends. But like, if you have any kind of space at all, like, the fish crates that wash up on the shore, they're always a great way to start. Just fill up a couple of fish crates. You have half a dozen lettuce, a couple of kale plants, and you just straight away you just feel kind of empowered that you've got something of your own.
Yeah.
And even like, there's a thing called microgreens. I'm sure people know about. You can buy the little tiny shoots.
Yeah.
People say, why don't we grow them? But it's like, I've got soil and land to manage.
Yeah.
You can do that. You can do that on your window. You can grow pea shoots or, little radish, whatever. And yeah, it's nutritious. It's there on your windowsill. It's very easy. And then the next thing is going, if you've got a garden, then go for it. Like, make one bed 1 year, make two the next, and then make 4, and then make 8, and then make 16.
Yeah.
And then you've got an acre out the back, and you've fed your family for the year. And
it's amazing, isn't it?
You very quickly can, learn the skills very quickly. But if you don't have access to that, is find the farmers. Like, they are there. There isn't many, but they are there, and support them. Like, wherever, the local farmers market, ask them, quiz them what they do. Like, are they organic, and are they doing anything more than organic, and this kind of stuff. And even by pushing them, like, if they see if everyone wanted to eat regenerative food tomorrow, we would all starve, and that would be the end of it.
Wow.
Because it doesn't exist. It's not out there. There is no regenerative farmers on any scale. So we are fed by industrial food, industrial model. That's what feeds the majority of us. So if the majority of us went looking for regenerative food tomorrow, the farmers wouldn't have it to give you. But if it was there, the farmers would obviously see there's a demand for it, and they would start, farming in that way. So it's chicken and egg thing all the time.
Yeah.
Who's going to come first? And I actually think the consumers are ahead of the farmers at the moment, because the consumers are definitely over the advertising and the wash of, processed food. And we're seeing so many of the research on health problems and all this stuff. It's all coming out in the wash now at this stage. So I think if the farmers had the good access, now if they could then advertise themselves to get out there, it is that whole who's going to come first. But I think the consumers will come if the farmers are there.
Yeah.
And so go out there and ask farmers and research online, and some of the meat producers will, post around the country and different things like that, and give them, your support, and pat on the back and tell them keep it up, because we need more farmers that are actually, because the hard thing now is if you're a regenerative farmer and you're moving your cows or whatever twice a day and you're doing all this extra work, you still sell your produce for the same as everyone else. And there's no difference.
Yeah.
So for a farmer who's organic at the moment, they're like, well, what's the point? You know,
Yeah.
I get this price. If I do twice as much work, I get the same price, and no one seems to value it.
Yeah.
So it's very hard to get someone to go an extra mile when they're already not making any money,
Yeah.
and they already don't have any time. So even just by telling them that you care and you want, you know, the best stuff, they might do the extra bit. You know, they might move the cows a day earlier if they can, and then you're going to benefit.
Yeah, and then they'll find the knock-on effect for themselves within their own farming practices.
Totally, it's all has to come kind of together, and that's the challenging bit. Is like trying to get that tipping point where it's all going on the right thing. Like my biggest concern in this this whole phase we now live in is, yeah, the information can get out there, the consumers can learn it, the farmers can shift, but the main thing is we need more farmers, and we need more people who want to do this in the, you know, right way. And who's training them, who's teaching them, and where are they? Because they ain't coming through Chagas, it ain't coming through any agricultural college. So that's my mission really, is so I'm kind of toned down. We used to do a lot of different events and you know, a lot of different things with the public, and people would come to the farm. We used to have a tour once a month. But it's all well and good having these local consumers getting it, but I can't feed everyone.
Yeah.
And I want to have more up and coming good farmers. So now we run this internship for the season, from April to October, 6 months, and it's, you know, it's 10 hours a day. They're up at 5 with me every morning, and they do the whole season, and they get a full on, you know, boot camp on what it's like to run a farm.
Brilliant.
And majority of them will run away and never be farmers ever again because they realize it's not for them. But the ones who come through, you know, they're going to be hopefully trained and ready to go, and they can start a farm and they can really do it in the right way. And
Amazing.
that's what I'm hoping to just keep doing every year. And then hopefully those interns will take on interns and have that domino effect, because that's the only real learning, is the peer-to-peer, like people who are doing it on the ground, and they can tell. And it's not even about the regenerative farming stuff. Like that's the easy stuff. Like that's the fun. That's the joyous. It's how you get this stuff out to consumers, and how you know, distribute it, how do you market yourself. It's like that stuff is so boring and so tiring. But it's like, it's literally half the job as a farmer, and that's the hardest bit. And that's why we have a real block with conventional farmers, because most conventional farmers are never ever going to stand at a market stall and
talk about their practices and really be passionate about it. No.
So we need a whole new up and coming culture of farmers who kind of are taking the whole thing on. I actually remember you talking about that in a social media post a couple of years ago, and like you said we need more farmers, and that really struck a chord with me. When you look at our history as a nation, I suppose at one point I think there was like 80% of us were farmers, if not more. And I don't know what the percentage is now, but it's certainly not that. Again, when you talk about young people coming through and trying to learn the practices of farming, there's probably a couple of courses out there, but they're not in the way that they need to be when you talk about regenerative farming. And I've been lucky enough to been on your land, and it's absolutely cracking. It's really beautiful. But I suppose it's fair to say that's very mixed land. And I guess the point that I'm coming to is that for young farmers coming up, they don't have to have this traditionally, you know, expensive, really lush, prepped land ready to farm on, that they can in fact start using this very mixed land and buy it at a much more competitive rate and start small and start there. Am I right in saying it? Yeah, totally. Well, nearly all kind of radical, you know, up and coming farmers are on poor land. Like, you know, if you go to West Wales and places, and west of Ireland is where most of the organic farmers are. Like, you know, the good land is in the hands of people with money, and people with money think a bit different often. So it's unfortunately, like all the best prairie land and stuff in America, it's all chemical farmers. Like, you know, the rough land is where you find the eccentric kind of oddballs doing different things. And this is one of the biggest hurdles. So unless you inherit land or you're a millionaire, how do you start farming? Because if you want to buy, you know, if you want to be into animals and you want to buy 200 acres and it's 10 grand an acre, you know, you
It's
need
a
to,
lot to start with, yeah.
yeah, and if you're trying to do it as a young person, because, farming, you want to be getting at it for 30, 40 years to really make some change on that land. So if you're trying to start a farm and, you're not even 30, do you have millions in your back pocket? Like, you've either got a really wealthy daddy or you're going to inherit land. And they're basically the options for people getting into it. So it's very tricky on that practical sense. But so the low lying fruit is the up and coming. It's the kids inheriting the farm, obviously. And a lot of the cool thing about Ireland is the kids that are inheriting the farm of my generation all went off to college, and they all went down the road of academia, and they've gone to Australia, and they've done all this stuff, and they've realized actually they liked farming and
Yeah.
it was fun, and actually sitting in an office in Dublin isn't what they want to do.
Yeah.
And they're like, hold on, actually my dad's going to retire soon and I want to go back to farming, but I don't want to do it with the conventional whatever system. I want to do something a bit more exciting and give back something to the community that I'm living in or whatever. So there is a small percentage of conventional farmers that I'm hearing going back to the farm with a different idea. So that's positive.
Yeah, so much potential in that.
But we need to create a system where the retiring farmer and the kids don't want to take it over, or there is no kids. How does that land get into people that are trained up and ready to go? Like there is organizations in France, for example, that have systems where you do proper 2-year internship, through half a dozen farms of all different types, and then you do, a year on the farm with the farmer who's retiring, and they break them in and show them the whole farm, and then you get like lifetime lease, so it stays with the family. It's still the family's farm,
Yeah.
but you get to invest your life in it, because it's how leasing something for 15 years and then it goes, like, that's a pretty traumatic experience. Where you've started a family and you've got a business going. Like, people often say to me, oh, I'd love someone to manage my land. It's like, well, you have to be willing to give them a lifetime lease or 35 years or something, because they need to make a career out of it. Otherwise, it's not really worth it. So that is a huge legal, complicated area that needs to be done well. And I totally respect farmers for not doing that at the moment, because there's nothing worse than trying it out and they weren't the right people, and then things like squatting rights and all sorts of horrible stuff can happen with land, and land is very emotional stuff. So we gotta get that right, but there needs to be a way that a trained up up and coming farmer has all the skills, but they just don't have the revenue to go and buy land, and land doesn't even go for sale that often. So it's trying to match that for people who don't have kids coming up, or they want someone else to manage it or whatever, that there is long-term arrangements, because that would be a game changer.
Definitely breaking new ground, pardon the pun.
Yeah.
Let's talk for a second about, I suppose, how you feel when you're on the land. Do you feel like you have a deeper connection to yourself through the land? Would you say that there's a kind of, through that connection, there's more an intuitiveness to farming than just what you can learn via apprenticeships or college or anything else? Like, do you think there's a kind of a spiritual element to the land?
Totally, yeah. Like, that would be definitely, I'd be a religious person, and I like going to church of any kind. I like the ceremony of things, and connecting to a bigger thing than us and I think being on the land is very much a part of that. And you really gotta see farming in a, like, I don't see this farm being anywhere close to where I want it to be. I'm thinking when I'm about 87, it might be getting close ish. That's when I'm thinking I might start slowing down a bit, because
good for you.
Because it's land has been going through our our hands for thousands of years, and it's all been passed on and cared for, and you have the Native American saying of every decision they would make is for the next 7 generations. Beautiful. And like those kind of thinkings and being on the land and knowing that kind of stuff, it's powerful stuff. Like, it really does feel quite, I don't know, like you're connected to something very big that's far beyond yourself. It's not about me, it's not about the now. It's obviously we got to enjoy the now, and you know, make sure we're not just flogging ourselves for some unknown good, but it is all for a greater purpose. And I think getting into that psyche of, you know, that's how you see the world, it changes how you are. Like, it changes how you are to people and are to the land. And it's a very nice place to be, because you kind of, I don't know, you get more patient and you're not as headstrong or whatever, because it's not about you. Like,
No, it's
really
not. It's selfless. I feel like again, something that I came to recently is that I'm in service to the greater good, whatever that may be. And like you said, not to flog yourself, because there has to be boundaries and self-love within that, but to be in service to something greater. And everything just works out perfectly when you adopt that mindset, is what I've found anyway.
If you can let go, like if you can kind of let go into that space and just go, it is what it's meant to be, and just trust the process, and you're kind of just going along for the ride. And I try and explain to some people sometimes that, you know, in those early mornings where you're seeing the birds or the trees or whatever little stream, you are the stream, the bird, the tree, and not so corny a way, but basically you're just a part of it all. Like, it's not anything weird. It's just like, I'm playing my bit and they're playing their bit, and we're all just acting out our roles. And
all these cycles of energy just moving together constantly. It's just a constant change. It's gorgeous, and it's a beautiful way to live, whether you're in a city or on land on a daily basis, to try and live in that mindset of like, just working.
It's a very healthy place, because you really get out of the way. Like, you get out of, you know, all the stuff, and the, you know, you're not rushing to the, you know, the 9 a.m. news to see what's going on. You know, you're just looking at, you know, that bird flying past or whatever. So it's like, that's what's important. You know, I get there's world news that we may need to keep up to date on, but at the same time, that can really mess with your head. Like,
it can, and you can't control it either. As in, you can't control anything outside of yourself. All you can control are your own emotions and what's happening in yourself. I can't even control what's happening in this room. You know what I mean? It's like, so why then worry about it? And like you said, that comes back to what you're saying, is just surrender into every moment, and then sure, it's grand. It's all fine.
And it's a real thing I saw at the very beginning of this project. We had a community garden, which is still there, and we'd have a lot of people there, and I just got to witness, you know, on a very small micro level, like, literally as soon as you do anything that's positive, whatever it is, the world's fine. Like, everything's great. Because once you're a part of something positive, and what you did is positive, and afterwards you feel good because it's positive, and you come back and it's still positive, you're now in a positive, you know, cycle. And it doesn't really matter what's going on then, as long as your actions are good. But that's why we have such a problem with, like, depression and stuff, is if people are doing jobs that are genuinely of no service and are even negative to the environment, like, it's very hard to have a good, you know, mental state, you know, and that must be challenging. Whereas if you can get onto a positive train of whatever it is, it's very easy to stay kind of
stay on that upbeat train. And they always say as well, I'm not sure who said this, but I read it recently, and it's the only part, I'm paraphrasing, I'm not going to get it right, but the only way to save the world is to save your little corner of it.
That's it.
You know, that, because you can't do it all or save it all. So it's just like, just take care of your own stuff, and you're good to go.
Because I ran for election a few years ago, and I wouldn't wish that on anyone. And you know, with the big ideas of like trying to make bigger change, and you know, trying to really, like, you know, go for it and all this kind of stuff. But I'm glad I did that early on, and now I've kind of calmed down in my thinking, because literally nothing happens from the top down. It never has, it never will. It only comes from the ground up.
Absolutely.
With concrete, you know, baby steps, one step at a time. Like, that is where things will come from. Like,
that's where lasting change is born.
Exactly. So I think remembering that, and not getting too wrapped up in the big, huge problems that we feel like we can, you know, flick of a switch, change things tomorrow. It doesn't happen that way. Like, that's just kind of moving shapes around at the top, but actually everyone changing on a fundamental, basic level each day is stuff that last, and I think that's where we need to focus really.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Like changing yourself first and foremost and your own practices within your life. And that, like I always say as well, you know, is one thing about, okay, I know there's an irony that I'm doing a podcast, but it's not about preaching. It's about, for me, I suppose, living my values, and that kind of emanates from me. And that's what I get from you and Sal and your lovely young family, is that you guys live your word and you live your values. And so that's an inspiration in itself. That's how you change the world. It's not by, like you said, running for you know, political parties.
Yeah, no, it's the only thing that works. And it's funny you say about running a podcast though, because I didn't understand podcasts at all a few years ago, and when I did one I was like, I don't understand why I need to be on the computer for so long. But you know, an interview is trying to get sound bites and, you know, trying to glitz and glam something up, whereas, you know, we're just having a conversation talking about different things, and that is real, like, and that is why podcasts I think are doing so well, and people want to hear real life stories of what's going on, and I now really get them, and now I really understand, whereas before I didn't understand. But we want depth of what's going on in the world, not just news flashes. And
the news bites. Like I've done, you know, as an actor, I've done so many interviews across TV and radio over the years, and you're really given kind of 7 to 10 to maybe 15 minutes. That's, you know, that's all great because you're promoting what you're promoting, and that's fine. But like you said, podcasts are, I mean, we're over an hour now, and we're probably going a little bit longer. Like it's the in-depth, and I see it as an invitation. So here's the invitation for people to listen. They don't have to listen, you know what I mean? So that's what's beautiful about it. Like if it pricks up someone's ears and they go, oh my god, I love what he's talking about, then they go, hey, and you know, they'll get more in depth.
Yeah, and I don't think I ever did an interview that they ever got the information right either. They always got it wrong, whereas at least in an hour, like, someone will get what you mean by the end of it. yeah, absolutely. Ferg, thank you so much. I'm going to finish this out with a little quiz, a little Live Wild quiz, if that's okay. Yeah. Sure.
Okay. So this is the Live Wild. We call it the Live Wild pop quiz. It's not really a pop because, you know. Anyway, it's the Live Wild quiz. What is the biggest wave you have ever surfed?
Probably here in Ireland, in Clare, I'd say. Probably at the Cliffs of Moher, that's my guess.
Wow. That's, like, to be able to surf out there. That was obviously, must have been a tow-in, was it? It must have been.
It was, yeah. I don't tow in that much, but I remember I did once out there, and it was probably one of the biggest waves, I'd say.
And what do you think? I don't want to be getting into the nitty gritty. What do you think height wise? I'm just so curious. I used to surf not nowhere near on the level that you did.
I don't know, like my passion for surfing was surfing really good quality waves, like really powerful good waves. So I remember even the day that we were out there, we were gutted that it wasn't that good. It was too big, kind of thing.
Wow. So
kind of just for fun, we just towed into a few waves and then went home. But it probably was one of the biggest waves. I'm guessing. I don't know. It could have been 30 feet or 40 feet, I don't know. But it's not the good part of surfing. Surfing for me is when you're surfing really good quality waves.
Absolutely.
That's the real buzz.
Still though, that's insane. You know, for people who are just listening, that's an insane, huge wave. Wow. Okay, what is your favorite vegetable and why?
I don't know actually. I definitely like nearly all vegetables. Jesus. Squash. I like squash, like pumpkins. Yeah.
I love pumpkins as well. I just think they are the best crack as regards vegetables.
They're my potato. That's because potatoes are a very dig system, and I don't like to dig the soil much. So I don't grow so many spuds anymore, and I grow a lot more squash.
You need
and
space.
They're really tasty.
They're really, really tasty, and you can make sweet and savoury from squash. That's what I love about them. Do you believe there's magic in the land?
No.
No?
Of course there is. Jesus, yeah, sure, it's all magic. Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. What do you stand for?
Yeah, I stand maybe for trying to make my little corner a little bit better each day. That's really what I work towards, and yeah, trying to be of service to the whole.
Lovely. If you were to distill yourself down to an essence, what would be your essence?
Jesus, I don't know. I would have
Soil.
yeah,
A mineral.
yeah. A stubborn rock or something.
What's the wildest thing you've ever done?
I'd say the wildest thing I've ever done was embarking on a journey with my wife, Sally, I'd say.
Awesome. Yep, it's a wild ride.
It certainly is.
What is the one thing you do every single day that helps you live wild and free?
I try and do my yoga every day. That helps.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Ferg, thank you so much. I really, really, really enjoyed the conversation. It's just been illuminating and very inspiring. So thank you.
Thank you, Hilary.